last night. I wasn't quite sure what they were doing, but it was there. It's Brent. Brent. What's Brent's last name? Forrest. That's right.
Hello.
Hey, Brent. This is Don Wise. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good morning, Don. I was expecting your call, and I'm sitting at my desk and look forward to our conversation.
And in my room, I've got Jenny's here, and Brandon just walked out to go walk around someplace,
Yeah,
and they speak so highly of you.
thank you. They are so sweet to me, and we met. It was one of those lightning strikes, and you're meeting somebody who's been a friend all your life. You're just meeting them for the first time, and I think Jenny gets that.
She's been like that since she was born. She showed up in she electrified the whole room, a maternity room. All the doctors laughed. It was, it's been that way every day.
And are you comfortable? I'm great for interviews, but I can a little bit. I've been going over the notes in my head, thinking of the things that were most pertinent. So a little of this may come off just like a storyteller monologue. So,
Well, I hear you're pretty good at that. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So here we go. Hey, Brent, tell me a time when your dad fathered you.
I'll have to tell you, Don, I think the way I'm going to turn that question upside down, because what I saw in my life, he fathered me in 10,000 ways that I don't remember. There were isolated incidents. But the real scene of that came together as he got older and toward the end of his life, and especially at his funeral. And so rather than telling you a specific incident, I could tell you a couple of stories about my dad and then turn this thing back around and look at the fruit of it. Sound good?
That would be perfect.
My daddy was born in 1929, 2 months before the big stock market crash. The Great Depression started. He was the second of four sons, and he did not get a lot of great fathering himself. Daddy's father was an alcoholic. And the boys were, as they were growing up, the parents divorced. His dad's mom just could not tolerate the behavior of her husband. And then he disappeared. And so she was raising four sons during the Great Depression. And in 1941, they're sitting by the radio, and the Pearl Harbor attack occurs, the president says. And so you picture this, you're a single mother in the Great Depression with four boys to raise. And in 1941, my dad would have been about 12. And so she tried her best to do the mothering and the fathering for both of them. And I think she did a heck of a good job. They didn't have so much money. Dad never really finished high school, but he could read, write, and think, But he went 12 years old. 12 years old's first story. He went to the local bicycle shop down the street, the Coley Westbrook Bicycle Shop. And he's 12 years old, and he goes to Mr. Westbrook and says, I want to come here and get a job. And Mr. Westbrook kindly said, well, son, that's just delightful. Said, you're a little bit young. You wait 2 or 3 years and come back, and I'll sure consider hiring you. So my dad took that in line, and so next thing he did, he kept going back to the shop, just kind of quietly showing up and staying out of the way. But he would see any of those workers needing something, hand them a wrench, hand them a tire, haul something over this, move something, bring them a glass of water. He just showed up, and he was there day after day. And finally, Mr. Westbrook said, okay, you got the job, kid. and that's a picture of my dad's character. And the one thing he had, we can talk about workaholics, but Dad had a very powerful work ethic at a time in this nation where it was survival to learn that you got to work for a living and you don't get anything too easy or free. He married young. My mother was 17 when they married. Daddy was 19. And I was born in 1952. And in 52, they didn't have any money. This was Fort Myers, Florida. I'm a fourth generation Floridian. So 1952, they scraped together and borrowed some money, and they spent $300 to create an inventory for a little corner grocery store. Didn't know what they were doing, but $300 wholesale prices, and they started a grocery store. And for the rest of my growing up, that's all I knew was dad and mom in the grocery store. They had a little independent grocery, and over time it grew and grew and grew. And what he gave me there and many others was an amazing education because I was born in 52. It wasn't too many years from now I got my first job. At the end of the day, I would sweep the floors. I would clean the floors, sweep them up. Wasn't that big a place. And he'd pay me 25 cents to sweep the floor. And over the years growing up in that store, I ended up doing every kind of thing that you do, the produce, the cashiering, the banking. I did every imaginable job in the grocery business except cutting meat in the butcher shop. And I knew I didn't want to do that because every one of those fellows was missing a finger or a thumb or something. It's really true, you know.
Yeah.
But I had an advantage. It was a wonderful advantage in that time that a lot of kids don't have the capacity to easily just go and get a job. You know, so Daddy had me a built-in place to work. I learned so much being there, and that's why I say to you, I can't necessarily give you one bullet or another, but when I give you the culmination, you'll get the picture very clearly of how my father was truly a father to me and to other men. He would say the most common sense stuff. He says, just if you want to learn how to run a business, always think about how it feels to be the customer. He'd say, always be thinking how it feels to be the customer. Well, I used that principle later in life in my own business as I was an entrepreneur all my life. And that's one of the most sound, simple principles in the world, you know. And so he would say, now listen, you say please, you say thank you, and if you tell people you're going to do something, you do it. Yep. He said, if you do those three things, you'll be ahead of 90% of your competition. So later in life, older in life, he never had a college education, nothing. But as he got older, Dad used to call himself a merchant. He actually kind of was proud that he had a profession. I'm a merchant, you know. And he ran a retail grocery store, corner store. Dad, he would hire these young men. A lot of them were high school boys or just out of high school, and to work in the store to sack groceries, to stock the shelves, and so forth. And I didn't realize this at the time, but years later, at Dad's funeral, Dad was about 84 when he died. I at the funeral, and I started seeing these full-grown men, with some with gray hair, at the funeral. And some looked familiar. I couldn't recognize all of them, but what turned out, there were at least a half a dozen men that came to my father's funeral. And I hadn't seen them forever. And these were fellows that had been teenagers working in my daddy's store. And they had this little show and tell time like people like to do at funerals nowadays, you know, give up and just tell a little memory or something. And these fellows stood up and started saying that my dad was the father they never had. You understand?
I do, absolutely.
And there were beautiful stories. One guy's practically tearing up because he had a really rough time coming up. And Dad was just big on common sense and telling him, here's how you make it in life. Here's how you work for a man. And his principles were so cool. One of the things I remember he'd tell us, he paid everybody in cash on Friday night, including me. Friday night, we sit around and get our cash. And he said, listen, son, when you pay somebody, when it's payday, you are not giving them anything. You are giving them their money. It's not your money. You're giving them their money. They've already earned it. So don't ever take the attitude that you're doing them any big favors. He also provided lots of free groceries for people. I never learned this until years later, till the funeral. There were families where someone was sick or the husband had broken a leg or they couldn't get work or whatever. And he would provide them free groceries 2, 3, 4 weeks. And his only rule was don't tell anybody.
Yeah, that's right. The whole place would be covered.
You know, and I don't want to make him sound like he's a saint, but he had a strong work ethic. And you could hear his mother, too, in his voice. There were times, because I knew my grandmother well, and she could kind of preach, you know, she could really moralize. And you'd hear that voice say, if you're complaining or whining about something, and you'd hear him say, you be grateful for what you've got. You know, be grateful for what you got. That's your starting point in life. And it made perfect sense. So at the funeral, as I told you, these people came out, and that's when I began to see this pattern unfold. As I've lived longer, it's in looking back, these little memories pop up, but it was an entire network. And so much of what my father did, as is with so many of us, I never realized at the time. I wasn't grateful at the time. I wasn't fully aware at the time how much he did, how much he gave, and how much he sacrificed. And being a typical teenager, I was plenty aware of his what I didn't like about him, you know. Anyway, in this no particular order, but this one other story I've got to tell you. It's just too good a story. In his dad had always been fit and trim. He told us don't eat junk food, don't live on candy and Coca-Colas. So he taught us not to eat that stuff in the grocery store. So anyway, he was always fit. He didn't go exercise at the gym. He stayed fit by working and, you know, eating what he called real groceries, you know. So he, in his 70s, I guess around 73, 74, he started showing signs of Alzheimer's, which eventually took his life. It took about 9 or 10 years for Dad to die from Alzheimer's. And, you know, that's a pretty rough thing.
Yeah.
And so, but one of the toughest stages is the early stage where the Alzheimer's patient is losing it, but still clinging to their independence, and they become paranoid, and they don't know what's going on, and they can be angry or resistant. And it was coming to be the time that we had to take Dad's keys away from him because it just wasn't safe to drive a car. And I was not there. My brother was there. And they sat down with Mom and Dad, my brother, and a couple of social workers, clinicians, or whatever. And there was a young man with a clipboard. And he started asking my dad a series of questions, which are the Alzheimer's questions. Okay? Like, do you know what day this is? Do you know who the president of the United States is? Do you have any children? Can you tell me their names? What is 8 plus 9? And on and on. You get the scene.
Yeah.
And Dad's answering question after question, and the questions get more complex as we go. And you know, it's a formula for showing that you know, he's losing it, so to speak. So anyway, Dad's not quite sure what's going on. And he started thinking they were there to take his dog away from him.
Oh, my.
He told me later, he says, if anybody tries to take my dog, I'll kill him. And I think he would have, you know. So this is my favorite story about my dad. So he's sitting there. He doesn't know what's going on. He's very uncomfortable. He feels he's a little paranoid, and there's something really wrong with all these questions. And all of a sudden, he just stands up straight as an arrow, just as straight as a plank of wood. And he falls forward like a plank of wood and lands in a push-up position and starts doing military push-ups rapidly. Yeah. You see this? Okay. Then as he's doing these push-ups, then he starts doing what the clapping hand push-ups. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's really great shape.
Push-up. He clap. Well, he'd always been active, always worked, never did exercise, but he worked for a living. So he's clapping his hands and doing those push-ups. Then he pops up, dusts his hands off, sits down, and points at the technician and says, "Young man, when you can do that, you can ask me more questions."
That's right. It just shook him up. So what did your brother say the response was?
I think they were somewhat. I think that made a story they would never forget. You know, but that was so much my dad. He was a Depression era kid, had to drop out of high school, and he really was a great dad. And even though he had not gotten great fathering, he became a father to many, many people. Now, my brother is 3 years older than me. We're still both alive and somewhat sentient. And we both, over time, keep appreciating more and more. We'll tell stories or recollect things. And it's in the looking back, Don, that I can say, oh, this is what Dad did and how he did and where he did. And he was a highly imperfect man, but he was a decent man. He was honest, and he kept telling us always, there's no such thing as something for nothing. You can't create wealth unless you earn something, build something, serve something, or grow something. He says, if you don't do something, it's not wealth. You're not creating wealth.
And you
Pretty
think
smart.
those are the moments with your father that shaped who you are today?
Sure shaped me in my career. Yeah, in many ways. He was a provider, he was a protector, and he saw himself as something of a teacher. And but he didn't hold us back. He wanted us to go on to college, which he never got to have. But later in my life, a short time or two, I worked for a corporation. I think I worked for Southwestern Bell in 1982 for a year or so. But most all of my adult life, I've been in business for myself. I've been an entrepreneur, and I eventually quote unquote, made my fortune as an investment advisor in San Antonio, Texas. I did that for 30 plus years. And I had a staff of 5 wonderful ladies who worked for me. And so many of the principles Dad taught me, I used them and they worked. My staff stayed for year after year after year, and the customers stayed year after year after year. And again, I'm going to make it sound like I'm a saint or an angel or a hero, but they were just basic principles. He always said that the employees are not a cost of doing business. The groceries are a cost, the electricity, the phone bill, the taxes, insurance, that's a cost of doing business. But he said the store, the business, is to support us. And that meant the family, the owner, and the employees. And I never forgot that one either. That was a primary rule.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for what you shared with us, because, I mean, right there, you've got your next book.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored, and fatherhood is in short supply these days, and I think it is a highly honorable profession, along with being a merchant.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brent, for this interview.
Don, thank you, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.